If suffering and misfortune are the greatest fears of life, then happiness must be the goal that humanity seeks. The question arises, what will bring happiness to humanity, material wealth or spiritual fulfillment? From this question, great cultures were born, philosophical thoughts emerged, and science and technology developed. Yet humans have still not found happiness. Is happiness too distant for humanity to reach, or is human greed so vast that people cannot perceive the happiness beside them? Introduction. In life, there are countless unexpected changes that we can hardly grasp, such as joy and sorrow, awaiting us. Many times we have to face the sufferings of this world, including disappointment, disillusionment, and loss, suffering in the midst of life. How can one achieve a peaceful, happy, and stable life amidst the ever-changing stream of life? This is something everyone desires, seeks, and strives for. Therefore, happiness has become a widely sought-after topic in human society. But who truly attains happiness? According to Buddhism, happiness is a peaceful way of life in the present moment, right in this very life, following the Buddha's teachings. Happiness is inherently a very natural quality present in each of us, inherently clear and genuine. However, due to ignorance, greed, hatred, delusion, and attachment to the self, we fail to see it and live in that nature. In the spirit of Buddhism, living a simple but meaningful life, when the mind settles and returns to a peaceful way of living, staying away from extreme states, and walking the middle path, happiness becomes vast and boundless. The concept of happiness. Happiness has always been the goal of human life, and everyone yearns to find it. Regardless of place or time, the objectives that people seek, wealth, money, fame, status, health, good friends, success, spiritual fulfillment, and freedom from life's troubles, all stem from the desire to live happily. So, what is happiness? Happiness is simple and close, like a rose in a young woman's hand, yet it can also be as distant as a noble truth. The English and Americans call it happiness. The French call it bonheur, meaning a feeling of peace or a positive psychological state, directing human development upwards. Happiness is synonymous with peace, joy, the satisfaction of both body and mind, human morality, or the transcendence of anxiety and trouble. However, happiness is just a vague concept without a definitive form. This is because human emotions are different and always changing, never static, like a thirsty person who finds happiness in drinking water, whereas someone who is not thirsty and is forced to drink may feel misery and discomfort. Therefore, definitions of happiness are relative. Happiness is always associated with positive feelings about life, noble aspirations within each person's consciousness, expressed in social life through words, actions, or through the calm and serenity of the inner self amidst life's anxieties and busyness. Happiness is the soul of culture and human civilization, peace for life, compassion for society, and a bridge connecting individual and collective lives. Therefore, it can be said that where there is happiness, there is peace, and where there is peace, there is no suffering or misfortune. The purpose of life is happiness. You are not born to live in unhappiness. You are born to be happy. Throughout history, there have been many perspectives on happiness, each with its own value corresponding to different eras, societies, or even within the scope of individuals. Therefore, the author addresses some notable points in recognizing happiness to gain a more accurate understanding in reality. Definitions of happiness, according to scholars. Peace and happiness are two fundamental aspects of life that the people always wish to attain fully and completely, to elevate life and infuse it with faith and vitality throughout the turbulent journey of human existence. However, desire and attachment have caused the mind to become increasingly restless, and happiness gradually slips away. We are dissatisfied with many desires or burdened with the anxieties and joys of worldly affairs, causing the body and mind to be trapped in a cycle of mundane troubles. This shows that the process of achieving happiness involves accepting difficulties and challenges. Moreover, one must accept the values that change over time. This will be a great challenge for everyone, but if a person has the courage and equips themselves with the skills to endure well, they hold the key to success and can unlock the door to happiness. The first lesson in achieving happiness is patience and the ability to let go, which will generate positive energy and lay the foundation for life. A leaf falls, wherever it lands, it returns to Mother Earth. A flower blooms, wherever it blossoms, it spreads fragrance. A person lives, wherever they are, there is life. Embracing circumstances brings freedom, and a peaceful mind is our true home. Yesterday grows more abundant, while tomorrow grows less. The path we travel has become longer. We have met more people. It is at this moment that we realize the most beautiful scenery of life is when the inner self is calm and at peace, and the mind is clear and alert. This shows us that training the mind is the most effective method that the Buddha taught for daily practice. It helps alleviate the physical and mental suffering that burdens our consciousness, allowing everyone to remain calm and peaceful. Buddhism has emerged in the world and entered into the spiritual life of individuals with the sole purpose of recognizing the nature of existence and suffering. Additionally, the Buddha taught methods to identify and eliminate suffering, leading to peace, or in worldly terms, tranquility and happiness, when suffering and pain are absent. Therefore, the appearance of the Blessed One brought happiness for the majority, peace for the majority, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, happiness, and peace of gods and humans. Who is this person? It is the Blessed One, the Arahant, the fully enlightened one. This very person, monks, when appearing in the world, brings happiness for the majority, peace for the majority, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, happiness, and peace of gods and humans. In the pursuit of happiness, there are two important aspects that must be fully addressed to bring about peace and happiness: the material and the spiritual. If both are stable and fulfilled, the state of mind will increasingly flourish, creating a foundation for happiness. Therefore, the Buddha taught, "I observe the world, and there is nothing that changes as rapidly as the human mind." Why? Because the human mind changes very quickly in response to circumstances. In the worldly and the supramundane realms, nothing can compare. You should maintain the nature of the mind in this way. Buddhism views humans as the center, the main subject, which is a very progressive thought. If the human mind remains greedy, selfish, and authoritarian, human society will continue to be like hell. Conversely, if the mind is treated, reformed, and made flexible, purifying greed, anger, and delusion, human activities will become enlightened, and society will become beautiful, a terrestrial paradise. In summary, Buddhist education is fully built on four virtues: moral virtue, intellectual virtue, practical virtue, and resultant virtue. These form the foundation for bringing peace, benefit, and happiness to humans. Buddhist ethics promote a life of purity, cleanliness, and health, as only a pure life can ensure a happy life. In the discourse on the simile of the cloth, the Buddha affirmed, according to Buddhism, the mind's reaction to sensory events, or the habitual pursuit of pleasure, resistance to pain, or unconsciousness towards neutral feelings, is the reason for the arising and growth of the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion, which in turn means the arising and growth of suffering. The more the mind reacts or is entangled in sensations, the more greed, hatred, and delusion have the conditions to grow. Therefore, peace and happiness do not come to us easily. They are achieved through the process of effort and self-improvement to master one's own mind and actions. In the context of human life, which is gradually losing balance, our peace and happiness tend to decrease while anxiety and unrest increase. It is truly joyous that amidst the uncertainties of life, there are hearts filled with altruism and compassion, offering gifts to life and warming hearts that are in pain and feeling lost in the vastness of life. Because what brings us the most happiness and peace is seeing others happy. The Buddha taught 10 important principles in life that help people achieve peace and happiness, from the narrow scope of individual and family to the broader scope of society. These principles are: 1. Every morning when we wake up, we are a new person. What we do today is the most important. 2. Having a precious human body is a blessing. We need to cherish every moment of life. 3. Purity and simplicity are the wings that help the soul soar. 4. Happiness is a feeling. Take it lightly and feel at ease in your heart. 5. Attitude is shaped by practice. We need to be calm and loving. The Buddha's teachings on the heart show that a kind heart enjoys blessings. 6. Happiness is not about accumulating a lot for oneself, but rather giving and sharing what you have with others. That is true happiness. When you are happy, your destiny will be bright. 7. Happiness never comes to those who do not appreciate what they have. 8. Do not try to hold on to things that do not belong to you. Letting go will bring long-term happiness and benefits. 9. Hatred is like holding a hot coal in your hand. You will get burned before you throw it at someone else. 10. Purity and simplicity are the wings that help the soul soar. Peace and happiness are inherent in each person. The key is awareness and eliminating self-attachment. Buddhist conception of happiness. The Buddhist conception of happiness is always rooted in a life of morality, peace, meditation, wisdom, and liberation. This way of living elevates humans to a supreme position, affirming that they have the ability to eliminate all suffering and end the cycle of birth and death. If a person has sufficient willpower, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, and effort, and lives a pure and healthy life, they can ensure a life of peace and happiness. The Buddha taught monks in the past, and now, I teach only suffering and the way to end suffering. Teaching about suffering and the path to its cessation is essentially about happiness and how to live a happy life here and now, in this very life. Whether one experiences peaceful happiness or suffering and misfortune depends on their virtuous or unwholesome actions. Buddhism does not grant blessings or salvation. Instead, it teaches people how to live in a way that they can fully enjoy peace and happiness and escape the suffering of birth and death. The Tathagata is merely a guide. Whether one follows the path is their own decision. Just like a skilled physician who knows the illness and prescribes medicine, it is not the physician's fault if the patient does not take the medicine. In the Many Feelings Sutra and the Magandiya Sutra, the Buddha speaks of various types of joy and happiness that people can experience, such as sensual pleasure, heavenly joy, meditative joy, and the joy of liberation. Typically, the concept of happiness involves the enjoyment of sensory pleasures conditioned by the senses, such as beauty, delicious tastes, pleasant fragrances, soothing touch, sweet words, and beautiful thoughts, which are called happiness. Buddhism does not deny this. However, how these pleasures are perceived and enjoyed is of concern in Buddhism, as sensory happiness is a condition that contributes to the formation of this world. In other words, the nature of the world of desires is formed from the sensation of sensory pleasures, which in the scriptures, the Buddha often refers to as the realm of desire. The realm of desire means the pleasures belonging to the realm of desires. The peace and happiness of these desires have their value in sweetness, causing people to mistakenly believe it to be the truth. Thus, the more people chase after desires in this world, the more they suffer, suffering either from unfulfilled desires or from the impermanence and change inherent in material or psychological states. Alongside the sensation of happiness that humanity experiences, there always exists the sensation of suffering and misfortune. Sensual desires bring little joy and much suffering, many troubles, and therefore, much more danger. Therefore, Buddhism introduces to humanity a way of living that transcends the realm of desires through ethical living and the development of spiritual and intellectual growth. The control of sensory desires and the clarity of the soul, living a pure life, lead people to peaceful happiness, which is the transcendence of life's distressing sensations and remaining unmoved amidst the fluctuations of pleasure, pain, or neutral feelings. O wise one, there are these three feelings. What are the three? Pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither painful nor pleasant feeling. O wise one, these three feelings are impermanent. When it is known that what is impermanent is suffering, the sublime feeling of happiness does not endure. Therefore, in Buddhism, happiness is not only about living a moral and virtuous life, but also about liberating oneself, others, and society from suffering. Since all beings are equal in terms of life, death, happiness, and suffering, the Buddha advises his disciples to achieve morality, meditation, wisdom, and liberation, saying, "Accomplishing 5 qualities, O monks, a monk brings happiness to himself and brings happiness to others." One of the sighs. Here, O monks, a monk himself is fully endowed with moral virtue and encourages others to be fully endowed with moral virtue. He is fully endowed with meditation. He is fully endowed with wisdom. He is fully endowed with liberation. He is fully endowed with the knowledge and vision of liberation, and encourages others to be fully endowed with the knowledge and vision of liberation. Being fully endowed with these 5 qualities, O monks, a monk brings happiness to himself and brings happiness to others. Thus, the greater happiness must be the peaceful happiness that comes from detachment, from being far removed from worldly matters, known as serene joy and the joy of liberation. That peaceful happiness must be achieved through the cultivation of body, speech, and mind, with liberation of the mind and wisdom of liberation. In other words, the peaceful happiness of morality, concentration, wisdom, liberation, and the knowledge and vision of liberation. From this Buddhist perspective, we can see that happiness is not limited to worldly matters but extends beyond sensory pleasures through overcoming cravings and attachments, leading to the serene happiness of liberation, nirvana. Here, transcendence does not mean escaping from life, but living a liberated and peaceful life within it, not avoiding or shunning it. Meanwhile, under the same sky and with the same elements of earth, water, wind, and fire, ordinary people continually experience afflictions, dissatisfaction, fear, suffering, and lamentation. This great difference can be described as the difference between life and death and nirvana. In the same life and with the same earthly resources, one person enjoys the serene happiness of nirvana, while another endures the suffering of life and death. The starting point is the search for true life and happiness. One person reaches eternal joy, while another struggles with the debt of suffering. This is due to the correctness or incorrectness in approaching life's issues and understanding happiness. The Buddha mentioned 3 types of wrong views: wrong perception, wrong thinking, and wrong knowledge. It is these wrong views that lead people to suffering. We see that all beings seek happiness. Buddhism also seeks happiness alongside everyone else. If we use the term practice to refer to the pursuit and realization of happiness, then indeed, all of humanity practices. Some practice to achieve wealth, some practice to attain sensual pleasure, some practice to gain fame, and some practice to acquire knowledge, all things that the world considers to be happiness. But unfortunately, because they do not see that all these things are impermanent and non-self, all of them are meaningless in the face of the ceaseless flow of life, which is essentially the ceaseless flow of death. Suffering, regret, and the inability to hold on to them are inevitable. We recall that Shakyamuni Buddha renounced everything, things that he possessed in far greater quantity and quality than ordinary people. Not because he abandoned happiness to seek asceticism. If one thinks that Buddhism is the denial of happiness and the pursuit of asceticism, then Buddhism probably would not have survived until today. On the contrary, Buddhism is thoroughly positive. It is the path to end suffering and realize eternal joy. But because he saw that the happiness he had was only temporary, based on the impermanence and non-self of the world, therefore, he gave up everything to practice, to achieve the ultimate and eternal happiness called nirvana. The Buddha's renunciation is an invaluable lesson for the world, for each human being, that happiness is not found over there, in empty and perishable things, but right here, in the realization of unconditional joy, the ultimate goal of human life, which we can call by various names according to our preferences, inclinations, and capacities. Nirvana, Dharma body, enlightened nature, complete compassion and wisdom, Buddha nature, the original face, referring back to the 3 aforementioned wrong views, wrong perception, wrong thinking, and wrong knowledge. Scriptures often mention 4 aspects of these wrong views. 1. Seeing impermanence as permanence. Seeing dissatisfaction and suffering as satisfaction and happiness. 3. Seeing non-self as self. 4. Seeing impurity and filth as purity and cleanliness. By chasing after these wrong views, one experiences the suffering of birth and death. The world has posed the problem incorrectly and then either does not know how to solve it or solves it incorrectly, leading to an endless chain of mistaken links. Because people do not see dissatisfaction, suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and non-self, they seek happiness in suffering, seek something in nothing, seek permanence in the continually arising and ceasing, and seek self where there can be no self. They end up chasing illusions, ultimately finding only suffering, emptiness, decay, and insecurity. In contrast, Buddhism is extremely simple yet profoundly deep. Do you feel pain, unease, and boredom? The truth of suffering. You must find the real cause of that suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering. And when the cause of suffering is clearly seen, the suffering immediately dissipates because it no longer has a place to take root. When the cause of suffering is seen, no one continues to cause themselves suffering. Once it is realized that the burning sensation is caused by oneself holding a flame, no one continues to burn themselves. The truth of the cessation of suffering. The process of resolving suffering and pain is now clear. It depends on whether we apply it and to what extent. The truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. Suffering, dissatisfaction, and the impossibility of true fulfillment are inherent in life. Just as the Shurangama Sutra says it is impossible to cook sand into rice, or the Perfect Enlightenment Sutra says it is impossible to wait for illusionary flowers to bear fruit, every human being has experienced this. However, few see the essence of suffering and dissatisfaction beyond its superficial manifestations. Perhaps few philosophical schools have approached the first noble truth of Buddhism, the truth of suffering, as closely as the existentialist movement in mid-20th century Europe. With the economic insight of writers, the deep contemplation of philosophers, and a subtle empathy, existential philosophy perceives the suffering inherent in the human condition, being thrown into life bewilderingly, the randomness of existence, limited circumstances, the finiteness of life, the constant orientation towards death, the inescapable loneliness, the uncertainty, and the fragility of human life to the point of futility. Human life can feel as unbearably meaningless as the myth of Sisyphus, perpetually rolling a boulder up a high mountain, only for it to roll back down again, and then rolling it back up, only for it to fall again. This perhaps symbolizes each lifetime's unending struggle and failure to achieve liberation. Failing to see the truth of the cause of suffering, samudaya, the cause of all afflictions, suffering, finiteness, and failure, and the ultimate solution for the human condition, which is the truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha, existentialists resort to choosing a misguided solution and deem it the meaning of life. When they see that life is bounded by the limits of birth and death, and when they see that life is finite and absurdly futile, they grant humanity a right even smaller and more fragile than the span of human existence. The right to rebellion and choice as expressions of freedom. The freedom they speak of, in a life confined by ignorance and delusion, is inevitably a limited and sorrowful freedom. We can see that existential philosophy has helped humanity reflect on its finite nature and the eternal issues that come with it, confronting individuals with loneliness and emptiness as they face themselves, placing them face to face with the inescapable reality of death, and exposing the vanity of all attachments. It can be said that they have approached the first noble truth of Buddhism, the truth of suffering, dukkha. However, they cannot go further to see the cause of suffering, which is the truth of the cause of suffering, samudaya, and thus cannot resolve the human condition, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path. Consequently, their philosophy becomes pessimistic and leads to a dead end. Reflecting to see suffering but not being able to solve it only deepens the suffering. This is not unique to existential philosophy. Literature and human culture often remain entangled within the bounds of the truth of suffering. It must be said that many people, both past and present, see Buddhism only in the phase of the truth of suffering, dukkha, leading to the very mistaken belief that Buddhism is pessimistic, world-denying, and nihilistic. If Buddhism stopped at the truth of suffering like existential philosophy, it would not be Buddhism and would not have remained a source of life for humanity to this day. Buddhism is profoundly positive, as it not only points out the bound state of human existence, but also identifies the cause of this bondage, severs the bonds, and truly liberates humans through an essential path. Perhaps this is why existential philosophy, with its leading intellectual and cultural figures of Western culture, only flourished for a few decades in the mid-20th century. When Buddhism truly emerged in the West, the existential movement in Europe and the Beat generation in North America quickly faded. If we use the term existential to emphasize living in the present, focusing on the practical reality of the here and now, without dreaming of an illusory solution in another life, another place, or projecting onto a divine benefactor, then it must be said that there is nothing more existential than Buddhism. This is the existentialism of one who has eradicated suffering, practicing mindfulness in the present, experiencing present joy, not regretting the past, not longing for the future, living eternally in the present. Thus the body is bright and beautiful. This is the present nirvana, existentialism of the sixth patriarch Huineng. According to your words, it seems that apart from the physical body there is the Dharma body, separate from birth and death to seek extinction, nirvana. And you deduce that nirvana is eternal bliss, believing there is a body that experiences it. This is the delusion of clinging to birth and death, being entranced by worldly pleasures. Now you should understand that the Buddha teaches that all people mistakenly identify the five aggregates as their own self, discriminating various phenomena as external objects, desiring birth and fearing death, constantly changing from moment to moment, without realizing it is all illusory and false. They futilely endure the cycle of rebirth, mistaking the eternal bliss of nirvana for suffering, seeking it throughout their entire lives. Out of compassion for these deluded beings, the Buddha taught the true bliss of nirvana, where in a single moment there is no appearance of birth, and in a single moment there is no appearance of death. There is no birth or death to be extinguished, and this is the present realization of cessation. Only when it is presently realized can it be called eternal bliss. This bliss has no one to experience it and no one not to experience it. How can it be said that nirvana prohibits all phenomena? Happiness is real. Happiness truly exists amidst the smallest, simplest things in life. Yet we often cannot easily perceive or grasp it in an instant. Once we understand and apply the teachings of the Buddha in our daily lives, we will no longer have the desire to search, nor will we feel lonely, suffering, or sorrowful during the challenging and tumultuous journey of life. Instead, we will experience a genuine, eternal happiness in the radiant light of the Tathagata's teachings. Ordinarily, we do not recognize the value of the simple things that surround us, such as a close relationship, a familiar object, or a routine action or habit. It is only when these things are gone that we realize how precious they were. There are many things that seem ordinary at first, but later we find them to be very important and meaningful. Therefore, we should appreciate and reflect on this to understand that living is being happy, and we must care for and nurture this happiness every day. Living simply allows us to feel that everything becomes lighter and provides moments to truly savor life. The present is a time free from the pain and troubles of the past and without the anxieties and desires for the future. We must appreciate the fortunate, beautiful, and happy things around us, making life more meaningful and worth living. Happiness is not far away. It is here, right now. The crucial thing is whether our eyes can see it and whether our hearts can feel it. Knowing how to let go is also a way to achieve happiness. Letting go means releasing greed, anger, ignorance, and not clinging to things that cause suffering and distress. When our minds are filled with worries and anger, there is no room for happiness. Each of us is fighting for our own happiness. We must wield the sword of wisdom to cut off the afflictions and the bonds that tie us to past memories or to illusory aspirations for the future. By learning to let go, our lives become less burdensome, simple, and light, allowing happiness to appear. Different living environments come with their own advantages and difficulties, but regardless of the circumstances, we must remind ourselves to seek peace and not constantly compare our situation to others. People often think happiness exists in a place where everything aligns with their desires, but in reality, such a place does not exist. Happiness can be found anywhere. The key is whether we recognize it. When we know how to practice, find peace in the Dharma, we can be happy and peaceful within ourselves, no matter where we live. Living is a great happiness, so we must live meaningfully in this fragile life. Happiness can bloom in our hearts if every day we know how to love others, do useful deeds without being overly concerned with personal gain. Happiness also comes from sharing, understanding, and treating others with sincerity and generosity, thereby awakening noble feelings in their hearts. More than 2,500 years have passed, but today we still have the opportunity to learn and practice the Buddha's teachings, which is a great blessing. After many years of ascetic practice to find happiness through liberation, the Buddha finally attained enlightenment. With boundless compassion, he did not forget to teach sentient beings the way to escape suffering and attain the ultimate happiness of liberation like him. Life is a long series of joys, sorrows, sufferings, worries, anxieties, and insecurities. Finding true happiness is not easy. Living in the light of the Dharma, Buddhists can attain true and lasting peace and happiness. Conclusion: happiness in Buddhist philosophy is very simple and accessible to everyone. The light of the Dharma helps us to be content with our present life, to maintain the flame of faith, hope, and to find happiness within ourselves. A person who grasps this secret to happiness will open countless doors to other forms of happiness. Living in a turbulent world, everyone wishes to become better, more useful, kinder, happier, and more peaceful. This wish is very human, very practical, and very suitable for everyone's mentality. However, not everyone knows how to achieve happiness and peace. Some people wholeheartedly seek true happiness and liberation, but with insincere hearts and improper practice, causing suffering for themselves and others, and creating chaos in society. This results in an unhappy society. Therefore, from a Buddhist perspective, true happiness must be the right kind of happiness, based on altruism, selflessness, and the path of morality, concentration, and wisdom. This kind of happiness transcends arrogant thoughts filled with desire and pain, leading to a peaceful mind, liberation, and nirvana. From the Buddhist perspective on happiness that has been presented, we can understand the very practical values of happiness in life, expanding many new aspects for individuals and society today.